A little girl told Santa Claus that it would be her mother's last Christmas, unaware that he was a millionaire in disguise. What happened next changed their lives forever. A story that will touch your heart. Subscribe, leave a like, and comment where you're watching from. The sound echoed through the vast atrium of the Mall of America, a chaotic symphony of conversations, hurried footsteps, and the jingling of Christmas decorations swaying gently with the air-conditioning breeze. It was a December morning in 2023, and New York was breathing that unique atmosphere that precedes Christmas. A mix of anticipation, consumerism, and for many, nostalgia. David Johnson adjusted the fake beard that was itching his face for the 10th time. At 38, he never imagined he would be dressed as Santa Claus in a mall. But there he was, sitting in an overly ornate chair, surrounded by artificial trees covered in fake snow and smiling elves made of fiberglass. The red suit was tight on his shoulders, clearly not made for someone of his athletic build, and the black boots made his feet sweat uncomfortably. "Why the hell did I agree to this?" he muttered to himself, watching the line of children stretching across the food court. The charity event had been the idea of his marketing department, a way to humanize the Johnson Hotels brand during the festivities. As CEO and owner of the luxury hotel chain, David could have simply sent a hefty check and stayed in his office at the top of the corporate building on Wall Street. But something inside him, perhaps guilt, perhaps emptiness, had pushed him to participate personally. The divorce had happened 3 years ago, but the wounds were still fresh. Sarah had taken Ethan, his 10-year-old son, to Los Angeles, claiming that David was married to his work and unable to be a present father. The worst part was that she wasn't wrong. David had thrown himself into business after the separation, aggressively expanding his company, acquiring hotels all over the country, working late into the night as a way to numb the pain of his son's absence. "Next!" called the event coordinator's assistant, a young woman with pink hair who seemed to have enough energy to light up half the city. David straightened in the chair and forced the most convincing smile he could muster. The child approaching made him stop breathing for a moment. She was a small girl, perhaps 7 years old, with curly brown hair tied up with a handmade red bow. She wore a red dress, but David, with his trained eye for detail, immediately noticed that the fabric was faded and there were small patches on the seams. The black shoes were worn but clean and carefully polished. What impressed him the most, however, were the girl's eyes. Large, brown, but carrying a maturity that should not exist in a child of her age. They were eyes that had seen too much, understood too much, suffered too much. "Hi, Santa," she said in a soft voice, almost a whisper, timidly approaching the chair. "Hello, dear," David replied, his voice automatically softening behind the fake beard. "What's your name?" "Helena," she murmured, nervously fiddling with the hem of her dress. Can I say something in your ear?" David nodded, leaning forward. The girl climbed onto the step next to the chair and, placing her little hands on his shoulders, brought her lips close to his ear. What she whispered made David's world stop. "It's Mommy's last Christmas, Santa. She's very sick, and I just want her to get better forever." David felt as if someone had punched him in the stomach. The girl's voice was so small, so laden with an adult pain that should not exist in a child. He leaned back slightly to look into her eyes and saw tears forming, even though Helena was bravely fighting to hold them back. She doesn't know I know," Helena continued softly, "but I hear her crying at night when she thinks I'm asleep. And yesterday she had to go to the hospital again, but she said it was just to get medicine." David felt his throat tighten. For a moment, he completely forgot where he was, who he was, what role he was playing. All he could see was that brave child trying to be strong while her world was falling apart. "And your daddy?" he asked gently. Helena's face fell even more. I don't have a daddy. He left when I was little. Mummy said he became a star in the sky, but I think he just didn't like me." "Oh dear, I'm sure that wasn't it," David said, his voice wavering slightly. The situation echoed painfully in his own life. He too was an absent father, though for different reasons. Helena then pulled out a crumpled letter from her dress pocket. The paper was from notebook paper, clearly torn out in a hurry, and had colourful drawings made with worn-out crayons. "I made this for you," she said, handing him the letter. "It's my family." David unfolded the paper carefully. The drawing showed 3 figures: a tall woman with long hair and an oversized smile, a small girl holding hands with her, and where the father should be, Helena had drawn a snowman. At the top of the page, in childlike handwriting, it read, "My family at Christmas." "It's very beautiful," David said, and it was true. There was something touching in the simplicity of the drawing, in the way the girl had tried to create a complete family, even with such a painful absence. "The snowman is my daddy," Helena explained. "Because he's in the sky where it's cold, right? And sometimes he comes down to visit me in the winter." David had to cough to disguise the emotion rising in his throat. "Helena, dear, what exactly would you like me to do for your mommy?" The girl looked at him with an unsettling seriousness. "She works very, very hard. She leaves home when it's still dark and comes back when it's dark again. She cleans offices, you know, and she's always very tired. Sometimes she trips at home because she's dizzy, but she says it's just sleepiness." "And where do you live?" "In East Los Angeles. It's far from here. We had to take 2 buses to come. Mommy said that this year we wouldn't be able to come see Santa Claus, but she saved up money for the fare to give me this surprise." David looked over Lily's head and saw on the other side of the photo area a young woman waiting. She was clearly the girl's mother. They had the same curly hair and large eyes. But even from a distance, David could see the exhaustion in her posture. She was leaning against a column, and even though she tried to smile while watching her daughter, there was a concerning paleness in her face. "Is that your mommy?" David asked, discreetly pointing. "Yes. She's the most beautiful woman in the world, right?" Lily said with a pride that made David's heart tighten even more. "She always says that we're a complete family, just the 2 of us, but I wish she didn't have to work so much." David made an instant decision. "Lily, I promise I will do everything I can to help your mommy. But I need you to promise me one thing in return." "What?" "Promise that you will keep being a brave girl and take care of your mommy while I work on my Christmas magic." Lily nodded vigorously. "I promise, Santa, I always take care of her. And promise me that you will study hard and be a good girl." "I already study. Mommy teaches me math at home. Because she's very smart. She passed the college entrance exam to be a teacher, but she couldn't study because I was born." David felt another tightness in his chest. With every word, the story became more moving and more unfair. "Your wish will come true," he said, taking her little hands in his. "But remember that Christmas magic sometimes takes a little while to work, okay?" Lily smiled for the first time since she approached. It was a radiant smile that completely transformed her little face. "I will wait. I'm good at waiting." After Lily ran back to her mother. With the lollipop that the production offered to all the children, David remained in the ornate chair for 2 more hours, attending to dozens of other children. But his mind was completely focused on that little girl in the faded red dress and her mother who worked 3 jobs to survive. When he finally got out of the Santa Claus suit, David had already made a decision that would change not only Lily and her mother's lives, but also his own, in a way he couldn't yet imagine. 3 days after the meeting at the mall, David Johnson was in his office on the 42nd floor of the commercial building in Wall Street, but his mind was still in East Los Angeles. The panoramic view of New York stretched out before him through the tempered glass windows, a sea of buildings, neighborhoods, mansions, and contrasts that defined the metropolis. But at that moment, all he could see were Lily's sad eyes and his mother's tired face. "Mr. Johnson?" The voice of Mariana, his secretary for over 10 years, echoed through the intercom. "Mr. Rodrigo Almeida has arrived for the meeting." David straightened his tie and composed himself. Rodrigo Almeida was one of the most discreet and efficient private investigators in New York, someone who had provided services for various companies in the Johnson Group over the years, always maintaining absolute confidentiality. "Let him in," David replied, putting away the crumpled letter from Lily that he couldn't stop rereading. Rodrigo entered the room with his characteristic posture, a middle-aged man with grey hair, well-tailored but unassuming suits, and that way of observing everything without seeming to pay attention. He was the kind of person who went unnoticed in a crowd, an essential quality in his profession. "Good morning, David," he said, shaking the businessman's hand firmly. "From the urgent tone of your call, I imagine we have something delicate to resolve." David gestured for him to sit in one of the Italian leather chairs that decorated the meeting area of his office. "Rodrigo, I need information about a family, a mother and daughter, but I want to make it clear, it's not for anything negative. On the contrary." Rodrigo raised an eyebrow, intrigued. In 15 years of his career, he was used to requests for investigations into fraud, marital infidelity, unfair competition. Rarely did someone hire him for benevolent purposes. "The mother's name is Lisa," David continued, pulling out some notes he had made. "I don't have her last name, but she works as a cleaning assistant. She lives in East Los Angeles with her daughter Lily, who is 7 years old. The girl said her mother works 3 jobs and is sick. Any additional references? Workplace, child, school?" David shook his head. "I only know they took the bus to the Mall of America last Saturday. They took 2 buses, according to the girl, and that the mother passed the college entrance exam to be a teacher, but couldn't study. Rodrigo was taking notes in a leather notebook. And what exactly do you want to know about them?" "Everything," David said without hesitation. "Financial situation, mother's health status, family history, where they work, where the girl studies. I want to completely understand their situation." "For what purpose?" David was silent for a moment, looking out the window again. How could he explain that a crumpled letter from a child had awakened something inside him that he thought was dead? How to talk about the guilt he carried for being Robert took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the situation. "Let's say, I want to help," he finally said, "but in a strategic way. I need to understand the situation before taking action." David nodded. He had known Robert long enough to know he wasn't impulsive. If he was asking for an investigation, he had solid reasons. "How long do you need this information?" "As soon as possible. Money is not an issue." "All right, I'll start today. East Los Angeles, mother Lisa, 7-year-old daughter Lily works in cleaning. With this information, I should have a preliminary report in 48 hours. 2 days later, David was back in Robert's office, this time carrying a bulky folder. His expression was serious. "I found the family," he said, sitting down, "and the situation is more complicated than you imagined." Robert leaned forward. "Go on." "Lisa Johnson, 29 years old, widowed. Her husband, Mark Johnson, died 5 years ago in a construction accident. She was pregnant with Lily at the time." "Pregnant?" "Lily was born 2 months after her father's death. Lisa graduated high school with excellent grades, passed the college entrance exam for education at NYU, but obviously couldn't study." Robert felt a weight in his stomach. The story was even more tragic than he had imagined. She works 3 jobs, David continued, consulting his notes. In the morning, she cleans offices in a business complex by the Hudson River, leaves home at 4:30 a.m. In the afternoon, she works in a diner downtown as a general assistant. And 3 times a week, she does night cleaning in medical clinics in the downtown area. Jesus, Robert murmured. And Lily? The girl stays with a neighbor, Mrs. Smith, 68 years old, retired. She takes care of Lily when Lisa is working. The girl attends a public school in the neighborhood, but according to my source, at the school, she is one of the best students in her class. And what about Lisa's illness? David's face darkened. That's the most delicate part. She was diagnosed 6 months ago with systemic lupus erythematosus. It's an autoimmune disease that can be very serious if not treated properly. Robert didn't know much about the disease, but from David's expression, he knew it was serious. The problem, the investigator continued, is that she doesn't have health insurance. She relies exclusively on Medicaid, and you know how the situation is with public hospitals for specialized treatments. She has been on the waiting list for a rheumatologist appointment for 4 months, and in the meantime, she takes anti-inflammatories bought at the pharmacy and keeps working. But according to a neighbor I spoke with, she has been fainting frequently. In fact, she was fired from one of her jobs last week for missing too much. Robert stood up and walked to the window. Down below, the traffic in New York continued its frantic pace, millions of people struggling to survive in a city that didn't forgive the weak. What's their financial situation? Critical. With the loss of one job, the income dropped to about $2,200 a month. Rent is $800 plus $150 for utilities. That leaves less than $2,300 for all other expenses: food, transportation, medicine, school supplies. And she has no family? Lisa is an only child. Her parents died in a car accident when she was 18. It was shortly after that she met Mark. She has no close relatives or in-laws. It's literally her and Lily against the world. Robert returned to his chair, processing all the information. The situation was even worse than he had imagined when Lily had whispered in his ear at the mall. Is there anything else I should know? David hesitated for a moment. There's something strange. Lily is not Lisa's biological daughter. What do you mean? I discreetly spoke with some old neighbors. They told me that Lisa lost the baby during childbirth, complications due to the stress of her husband's death. But 3 days later, someone left Lily at her doorstep, a newborn, with a letter. Robert fell silent, absorbing the information. Lisa registered the girl as her own. She never told anyone the truth. For all intents and purposes, Lily is her daughter, and the girl knows. Nothing? Do you have any idea who the biological mother could be? No. The letter had no signature or clues. It just said that the mother was very young and couldn't raise the child, but chose Lisa because she knew she would be a good mother. Robert was impressed. Lisa had lost her husband, her baby, her dreams of studying, and yet she had opened her heart to raise a child that wasn't even hers. David, I want you to continue investigating, but now with a different focus. What? I want to know everything about the healthcare system available for lupus treatment in New York. Private hospitals, specialists, treatment costs, and I also want information about private schools in the area, scholarships, assistance programs. David smiled for the first time in the meeting. Now I'm starting to understand where you're going with this. And David, Robert added, absolute confidentiality. Not even my secretary can know about this. Of course. But can I ask what the plan is? Robert took out Lily's letter from the drawer again. The plan is to make this last Christmas for Mom actually the first Christmas of a new life for both of them. After David left, Robert stayed in his office until very late, mentally devising a strategy that would change everything. He didn't yet know that by deciding to help Lily and Lisa, he was embarking on a journey that would also profoundly transform his own life. A week later, David Johnson stood in front of a small rented apartment in downtown New York, holding the keys to a borrowed 2015 Honda Civic from an employee. He wore faded jeans, a simple polo shirt, and running shoes, a look completely opposite to the Italian designer suits he usually wore. In the past 7 days, he had devised David meticulously crafted a plan that would require skills he never imagined he possessed. The ability to pretend to be someone completely different. The 485-square-foot apartment was on the 5th floor of a building without an elevator in Harlem. David had rented it for 6 months, paying up front, using the name of a shell company he had created specifically for this purpose. This would be the headquarters of the fictitious International Christmas Hope Foundation, an organization that existed only in David's imagination, but needed to appear absolutely real. "My God, what have I gotten myself into?" he murmured, looking around the empty space that he would need to transform into a convincing office. In the following days, David obsessively dedicated himself to building the identity of Miguel Santos. He bought simple furniture from a department store, hung fake diplomas on the walls, one in social work from NYU and another in business administration from Columbia University. He installed a landline phone, hired internet service, and even arranged for some promotional flyers for the supposed foundation. The hardest part was hiring an assistant who could maintain the charade. After much searching, he found Beatrice, a 23-year-old theater student who needed money to pay for college. David offered a generous salary for her to act as the foundation's secretary 3 days a week, inventing a story about being a pilot project of an international NGO. "So, Mr. Santos," Beatrice said on her first day of work, still getting used to the fake name, "what exactly is the profile of the families the foundation serves?" David, who had spent hours rehearsing this conversation in front of the mirror, replied with increasing conviction, "We focus on single-parent families in situations of social vulnerability, especially when health issues are involved. Our methodology is different from other NGOs." "How so?" "We don't make direct donations. We create opportunities, scholarships that look like lotteries, medical treatments presented as government programs, job opportunities that arise by chance. The idea is to preserve the dignity of the families." Beatrice nodded, impressed. "It's an interesting approach. And do you already have a family selected?" "We do. Lisa Johnson and her daughter Lily. They will be our pilot project here in New York." For 2 weeks, David prepared like an actor getting ready for the role of a lifetime. He studied social work techniques, read about government assistance programs, memorized statistics on urban poverty. He needed to be convincing not just for Lisa, but for anyone who might question his credentials. The first contact happened on a January morning. David, dressed as Miguel Santos, waited outside the public school where Lily studied. He had discovered through Robert that Lisa always picked up her daughter at 11:30 a.m. on the days she didn't work at the diner in the afternoon. When he saw Lisa approaching the school gate, David felt his heart race. It was the first time he had seen her up close since the mall. She wore a clean but worn pair of jeans, a blue cotton shirt, and white sneakers that had seen better days. Her curly hair was tied back in a ponytail, and even trying to disguise it, David could see the pallor in her face. "Excuse me," he said, approaching hesitantly. "Are you Lisa Johnson?" Lisa turned, immediately suspicious. In New York, strangers who knew her name rarely brought good news. "Who wants to know?" she replied, instinctively positioning herself protectively near the school gate. "My name is Miguel Santos. I'm the coordinator of the International Christmas Hope Foundation. I would like to talk to you about an assistance program for which your family has been selected." Lisa frowned. "Selected? I didn't sign up for any program." David had anticipated this reaction. You didn't need to sign up. Our foundation works with referrals from the community and partner institutions. Your name came to us through the community health center in the area. It was an elaborate lie, but plausible. David knew that Lisa frequented the health center trying to get a referral to a rheumatologist. What kind of assistance? Lisa asked, still suspicious, but with a spark of hope in her eyes that broke David's heart. Well, that's a bit complex to explain here on the street. Would you have a few minutes to talk? I can explain the program better. At that moment, Lily came running out of the school with her pink backpack and a drawing in hand. "Mommy, look what I made in art class," she shouted, but stopped when she saw the strange man talking to her mother. David looked at the girl and felt a wave of emotion. It was the first time he had seen her since the mall, and she seemed even smaller and more fragile than he remembered. "Hi, Lily," he said gently. "What a beautiful drawing is that?" Lily hid behind her mother, peeking shyly. "It's a house with a garden. When Mommy gets better, we're going to live in a house with a garden." Lisa ran her hand through her daughter's hair, embarrassed. "Lily, don't bother the man." "Not bothering at all," David said, crouching down to be at the girl's level. "I also like houses with gardens. I bet you would take very good care of the flowers." Lily smiled shyly and nodded. "Well," Lisa said, "about this program, how about we talk in a more private place? There's a diner nearby where we can have coffee while Lily has some juice." Lisa hesitated. All her protective instincts screamed for her to walk away. But the mention of the health center had sounded convincing, and she was desperate for any opportunity to improve her situation. "Okay, but just for a few minutes." At the diner, David ordered coffee for himself and Lisa, and an orange juice with a muffin for Lily. While the girl distracted herself coloring some drawings she always carried in her backpack, he began to explain his invented story. "Our foundation is a partnership between an international NGO and some American companies," he said, pulling out the flyers he had prepared. "Sent for printing. We have developed integrated assistance programs for families in vulnerable situations." Lisa flipped through the material, impressed by the graphic quality. David had heavily invested in the presentation to make everything more convincing. "Assistance how?" "Well, in your case, we identified 3 main needs: specialized medical follow-up, supplementary education for Lily, and support for professional training." Lisa looked at him in surprise. "How do you know about these needs?" "We conduct a mapping work with public services in the area. The community health center mentioned your medical situation, Lily's school highlighted her academic potential, and the local social assistance center has records about your professional situation." It was a detailed enough explanation to sound plausible, but vague enough to not be easily verifiable. "And what exactly would you offer?" David took a deep breath. It was the crucial moment. "First, we can arrange for you an appointment with a private rheumatologist through our medical partnership program. It's completely free, presented as an academic study on lupus in low-income patients." Lisa's eyes filled with tears. "Appointment with a rheumatologist? I've been waiting for months. I can schedule it for next week. Second, we have an after-school program for children with high potential. Lily could participate in supplementary activities on Saturdays, also free of charge. And the third, we are developing a training course in management and administration for single mothers. In the end, we help secure placements in partner companies." Lisa was silent for several minutes, absorbing the information. It sounded too good to be true, but at the same time David seemed genuine, and the materials were convincing. "Why us?" she finally asked. "There must be hundreds of families in worse situations than ours." David had anticipated this question as well. "Our methodology focuses on families where we identify potential for real transformation. You have education, Lily has exceptional academic potential, and you demonstrate a solid family structure despite the difficulties. It was true, even if said for different reasons than he presented. I don't know what to say, Lisa murmured. It feels like a dream. It's not a dream, it's an opportunity, but we need you to understand that the program requires commitment. Regular medical appointments, attendance at Lily's, activities, participation in the course when we offer it. Of course, I would do anything to improve our situation. David smiled, feeling a mix of satisfaction and guilt. Satisfaction for being able to help, guilt for having to lie. Then let's get started. Can I take your information to arrange the medical appointment? As Lisa dictated her information, Lily lifted her head from her drawings. Mommy, who is this man? It's Uncle David, dear. He works at a foundation that will help Mommy. Lily looked at David with curiosity. Are you like an angel? David nearly choked on his coffee. Why do you say that? Because you appeared out of nowhere to help Mommy, just like angels do in stories. David looked into those big, innocent eyes, feeling the weight of the responsibility he had taken on. I'm not an angel, Lily. I'm just a person who wants to help. But as he left the diner after scheduling Lisa's medical appointment for the following week, David wondered if he had become a prisoner of his own lie. Now that he had started, he could not stop. Lisa and Lily depended on David Johnson, and David would have to be perfect in this role for as long as necessary. 2 months had passed since the first meeting at the diner, and David no longer knew where David Johnson ended and where he himself began. The routine of alternating between the millionaire businessman in the morning and the NGO coordinator in the afternoon had become more natural than he would like to admit. On that Tuesday in March, David was in his office on Wall Street, reviewing the financial reports for the first quarter, when his personal cell phone vibrated. It was a message from Lisa. David, today's appointment was amazing. The doctor said the treatment is working very well. Lily wants to make a drawing to thank you. Can I bring it to you tomorrow? David smiled, putting the phone away. In the last 2 months, he had achieved much more than he had imagined. Lisa was receiving treatment from one of the best rheumatologists in New York, whom David had convinced to participate in the program through a generous donation to his clinic. Lily was attending tutoring classes on Saturdays at a private school in Brooklyn, which she believed was part of a social project from the city. The most impressive thing was that Lisa had landed a new job, cleaning supervisor in a commercial building, through a recommendation that David had discreetly orchestrated. The salary was 40% higher than her previous jobs, and she only needed to work in one place, not 3. Mr. Johnson, Mariana's voice echoed through the intercom. Your ex-wife is on the line. She says it's urgent. David felt his stomach tighten. Sarah only called when there were problems with Ethan. Hello, Sarah. David, we need to talk. I'm moving back to the US. What do you mean, moving back? I received a job offer in New York. The company is transferring all its Latin American operations here, and Ethan isn't doing well. David stood up from his chair. What happened to him? He's having problems at school, fighting with classmates, low grades. The psychologist said it's anger due to the absence of his father. The words hit David like a punch. During all these months helping Lily, he had neglected his own son even more. When are you arriving? Next week. And David, I want you to take on more responsibilities. Ethan needs his father. After hanging up, David stood by the window for long minutes. How would he manage to be a present father for Ethan while maintaining the facade of David Johnson? How would he explain the absences, the made-up commitments? The next day, David was as David Johnson in the foundation's office when Lisa arrived with Lily. The girl ran up to him with a drawing in her hands. "Uncle David, look what I made." In recent months, Lily had started calling him Uncle, and David had grown accustomed to the girl's genuine affection. The drawing depicted 3 figures holding hands, her, Sarah, and a male figure with a halo above his head. "That's you," Lily said, pointing to the figure with the halo. "The angel who saved Mommy." David felt a lump in his throat. "Lily, I've told you, I'm not an angel." "But you are. Mommy is feeling much better. I'm learning a lot of new things at my special school, and we even moved to a bigger apartment." It was true. David had arranged a better apartment for them through a fictional housing program. It was in the same neighborhood, but larger, safer, and with rent secretly subsidized by him. "And you know what?" Lily continued, whispering as if it were a secret. "I think you look like the Santa Claus I met at the mall." David almost spilled his coffee. "Why?" "The cologne. You both wear the same cologne. And your eyes. You both have the same kind eyes." Sarah laughed, tousling their daughter's hair. "What an imagination! Lily is always coming up with these crazy connections." But David noticed that Sarah had been watching him more closely lately. There was something in her gaze that made him uncomfortable, as if she were trying to decipher a puzzle. "David," Sarah said, "can I ask you a personal question?" "Sure." "Do you have children?" David hesitated. It was a question Sarah had asked a few times, and he always deflected. "Why do you ask?" "Because you understand children so well. And sometimes when you look at Lily, you have this expression, I don't know, melancholic." "I used to have," David said, deciding to use an adapted version of the truth. "My son lives far away with his mother. I don't see him much." It was technically true, even though Ethan was about to return to Los Angeles. "That must be hard," Sarah said softly. "Maybe when he comes to visit he could meet Lily. They could play together." David forced a smile. If she only knew that David and the wealthy father were the same person. That night, David returned to his 2-story apartment, completely mentally and emotionally exhausted. Maintaining 2 identities was becoming harder every day, especially now that Ethan would be back and would need his attention. His phone rang. It was an international call. "Dad?" "Ethan, how are you, son?" "Sad. Mom said we're moving back there. I don't want to go back to the United States." David felt his heart break. "Why not?" "Because you work too much and don't have time for me. At least here I have my friends." "Ethan, I promise it will be different this time." "You always promise, Dad, but you never keep it." The call ended, leaving David alone with his conflicting thoughts. How could he be a better father to Ethan when he was already fully involved in being a father figure to Lily? The following week, David was waiting at Los Angeles International Airport when he saw Sarah and Ethan coming out of international arrivals. His son had grown in the past few months. He was taller, thinner, and there was something in his eyes that David didn't recognize. It was a premature hardness, a distrust that shouldn't exist in a 10-year-old. "Hi, Dad," Ethan said flatly, accepting a quick hug before pulling away. "Ethan is excited to live here," Sarah said sarcastically. "He spent the whole trip asking if you would have time to pick him up from school." "I will," David said, looking at his son. "I'll rearrange my schedule." But even as he spoke, David knew it was a complicated promise to keep. How would he explain to Sarah and Lily that David Santos would suddenly have less time available? How would he reconcile Ethan's needs with the commitment he had made to the family he was secretly helping? On the way home, Ethan was glued to his phone, completely ignoring his father's attempts at conversation. When they arrived at the 2-story apartment where David lived, the boy looked around indifferently. "Where's my room?" David showed him the room he had prepared. decorated with soccer and video game themes. Ethan took a quick glance and flopped onto the bed. "When are you going to work?" he asked. "Why do you ask?" That? Because then I know when I can call my friends in Los Angeles without you saying it's time for me to adapt here." David sat on the edge of the bed. "Ethan, I know it's hard for you, but I want you to know that this time will be different. I'll have more time for both of us." Ethan looked at him skeptically. "You said the same thing before the divorce." That night, after Ethan fell asleep, David stood on the balcony of his apartment looking at the lights of New York. Somewhere down below, Lily was sleeping peacefully, dreaming of her guardian angel who had transformed her life. In the next room, Ethan slept restlessly, distrustful of his father's promises that had disappointed him so many times. David realized he had created an unsustainable situation. He couldn't be the father Ethan needed while continuing to be David Santos, but he also couldn't abandon Sarah and Lily now that they depended on the help of the fictional foundation. For the first time since he had donned the Santa Claus costume, David wondered if his good intentions had turned into a web of lies that would end up destroying both the family he was trying to help and his relationship with his own son. The phone vibrated. It was a message from Sarah. "David, Lily asked if you could go to her school play tomorrow. She's going to do a poem about guardian angels. It would be really special if you could be there." David looked at the message, then at the door of the room where Ethan slept. Tomorrow was Ethan's first day at his new school, and he had promised to take him personally. One time, David Johnson and Ethan Johnson had commitments at the same time, and he had no idea how to resolve the situation without hurting anyone. The next morning, David woke up at 5:30 a.m. with a knot in his stomach. He had spent the entire night trying to find a solution to be in two places at once, at Lily's presentation at 10 a.m. and taking Ethan to his first day at the new school at 9:30 a.m. "Ethan, wake up, son," he said, gently knocking on the bedroom door. "Today is your first day at the new school." Ethan emerged from his room with a grumpy face, wearing an American basketball team t-shirt and an expression that clearly showed his lack of enthusiasm. "I can go by myself," he mumbled, carelessly fiddling with his cereal. "You don't need to take me." "Of course I do. I want to meet your teachers, see what the school is like." "Why? You won't even have time to go to the meetings anyway." The statement hit David like a slap, but he tried to stay calm. "Ethan, I promised it would be different this time, and it will be." As they had breakfast in silence, David's phone rang. It was Beatrice from the foundation. "David, Lisa has called 3 times already. Lily is very nervous about her presentation and wants to know if you confirmed your attendance. What should I tell her?" David looked at Ethan, who pretended not to be paying attention, but was clearly listening to the conversation. "Tell her that I will try to make it on time. I might be a little late." After hanging up, Ethan stared at him with an expression that mixed disappointment and anger. "You already have a work commitment on my first day of school, don't you?" "Ethan, it's not like that. It's always like this. Dad, there's always something more important than me." In the car, on the way to school, Ethan remained silent, looking out the window. St. Benedict's School was one of the best private schools in New York, with tuition that cost more than Lisa's monthly salary. David had carefully chosen it, hoping that the stimulating academic environment would help Ethan adapt. "This is it," David said, stopping in front of the imposing classical architecture building. Ethan looked at the school, then at the other parents accompanying their children, all impeccably dressed and driving luxury cars. "You don't need to come in." "With me," Ethan said, already opening the car door. "Of course I do. It's your first day." "Dad, I'm 10 years old. I'm not a baby, and you obviously have somewhere to be." David turned off the engine. "Ethan, look at me." The boy turned around reluctantly. I know I've made many mistakes. I know I haven't been the father you deserve. But I love you more than anything in this world, and I will prove that to you." Ethan looked at him for a long moment. "Then prove it now. Stay with me today. Just today." David felt his heart tighten. At 10 a.m., Lily would be on stage at the public school reciting a poem about guardian angels, hoping her Uncle David would be in the audience. At 9:30 a.m., Ethan would be meeting his new classmates, needing his dad by his side. "All right," David said, turning off his phone completely. "Today is just yours." They entered the school together, and David was introduced to the teachers, met the coordinator, visited the library and the science lab. Ethan gradually relaxed and even smiled when the physical education teacher showed the gymnasium. But all the while, David was thinking about Lily. He imagined the girl looking for David in the audience, not understanding why her guardian angel hadn't shown up at the most important moment for her. At 11:30 a.m., when he finally took Ethan home, David immediately called Beatrice. "David, where have you been? Lisa has called about 5 times. What happened? How was the presentation? Lily was very sad because you didn't show up. She cried on stage during the poem. Lisa was worried, thinking something had happened to you." David felt the world collapse. There was an emergency. "Can I speak to Lisa?" "She went to work, but she said you can call her tonight." That afternoon, David tried to focus on Ethan, taking him to the mall, buying video games, trying to make up for years of absence with a few hours of dedicated attention. But his mind was with Lily, with the image of the girl crying on stage because her angel had missed when she needed him the most. At night, after Ethan fell asleep, David called Lisa. "David? Thank God, I was worried. What happened?" "Lisa, I'm so sorry. There was a family emergency and family. You never talked about family." David realized he had made a mistake. David Johnson was a single man with no close family. It's a very close friend, almost like family. He had to go to the hospital urgently. "Is he okay?" "Yes, he is. But what about Lily? How did she take it?" David heard Lisa sigh on the other end of the line. "She was very upset, David. She spent the whole afternoon asking if you were mad at her, if she had done something wrong." "Oh my God, of course not. She didn't do anything wrong." "I know, and I told her that. But you know how kids are. She had very high expectations for your presence." David closed his eyes, feeling the weight of guilt. "Can I talk to her tomorrow? Explain what happened?" "Of course. But David, can I ask you a question?" "Go ahead." "Sometimes I get the impression that you are, I don't know, divided. As if you have other responsibilities that you can't tell me about. Is that the impression?" David was silent for a few seconds. Lisa was more perceptive than he had imagined. "It's complicated," he finally said. "My work at the foundation sometimes overlaps with other personal issues. I understand. It's just that Lily has gotten very attached to you. To her you are—" As words of Lisa hit David like a painful revelation, he had become a father figure for Lily exactly when he was failing as a father to Ethan. "Lisa, I would never do anything to hurt Lily. She is very special to me too." "I know. It's just that, are you sure you can keep this commitment long term? Because if one day you disappear from her life—" "I won't disappear," David said, knowing it was a risky promise to make. The next day, David arrived early at the office of the International Christmas Hope Foundation, waiting for Lily to return from school. When she appeared with Lisa, the girl's face lit up. "Uncle David, you're okay. I thought you were in the hospital." David crouched down to her level. "I'm fine, yes, and I'm so sorry I missed your presentation. An emergency came up, but nothing excuses missing such an important moment. Do you still want to hear my poem? More than anything in the world." Lily positioned herself in the middle of the room and with the seriousness of a professional actress began to recite, "Angels don't always have wings. Sometimes they just have a smile. Sometimes they are people like us who appear when we need them most. My angel wears normal clothes, has eyes that shine with kindness, appeared when Mom was sad and brought hope to our home. He says he's not an angel, but I know that's a lie, because only angels can do real miracles." When Lily finished, David had tears in his eyes. The poem was about him, about David Johnson, about the role he had taken in their lives. "That was beautiful, Lily," he said, hugging the girl. "You are an amazing poet." While Lily showed her special school notebooks, Lisa watched David intently. There was something familiar about him that she couldn't identify. The way he looked at Lily, the gentle yet slightly melancholic demeanor, as if he carried an invisible weight. "David," she said when Lily stepped out to get water, "can I ask you about your son, the one who lives far away?" David tensed. "What do you want to know? Do you miss him? Every day? And why does he live far away?" David looked at Lisa, seeing in her eyes a curiosity that went beyond simple cordiality. "Because I wasn't a good father. I worked too much, was always absent. His mother thought it was best to take him away. And now, is he still far away?" "Actually," David hesitated, "he's back. Yesterday was his first day at the new school here in New York." Lisa nodded slowly. "That's why you had to miss Lily's presentation. You were with your son." David was shocked by her insight. "How did you—" "David, I'm a mom. I recognize the look of a father trying to balance impossible responsibilities." David found himself cornered between truth and lies. It's a complicated situation. "Maybe Lily can meet your son one day," Lisa said casually. "She would love to have a friend her age." I don't know if that would be a good idea," David said nervously. "Why? Are you ashamed of us?" "No, of course not. It's just that it's complicated." Lisa looked at him for a long moment, and David had the impression that she was starting to connect dots he was desperately trying to keep separate. When he left the foundation that afternoon, David knew his double. Life was becoming unsustainable. Sooner or later, the two worlds would collide, and he had no idea how he would explain to Lisa and Lily who he really was, nor how he would explain to Ethan why he had become a father figure to another child while struggling to reconnect with his own son. 3 weeks had passed since Ethan's first day at school, and David felt he was walking a tightrope emotionally. In the morning, he was the successful businessman trying to be a present father. In the afternoon, he transformed into David Johnson, the non-profit coordinator who had become a substitute father figure for Lily. On that Thursday in April, Ethan had finally made some friends at his new school. David decided to reward him by taking him to the movies at the Mall of America, the same place he used to meet Lisa and Lily as David Johnson. It was neutral territory, he thought, where the chances of running into anyone would be minimal. "Can we see the superhero movie?" Ethan asked, excited for the first time in weeks. "Of course, and then we can have pizza at the food court." Ethan smiled, a genuine smile that David hadn't seen in months. Maybe things were finally falling into place. The movie ended at 4:30 p.m., and they were walking toward the food court when David heard a familiar voice calling, "Uncle David!" David froze. He turned slowly and saw Lily running toward him, with Lisa a few meters behind, carrying shopping bags. "Damn," David murmured, before realizing he had spoken too loudly. "Dad, do you know this girl?" Ethan asked, confused. David felt the world collapse. There was no way to escape, no way to explain. The two worlds he had fought so hard to keep separate were about to collide right in the middle of the mall. Lily came running and hugged David around the waist. "What a surprise to see you here! And who is this boy?" David looked at Ethan, who was watching the scene with a mix of confusion and jealousy. Then he looked at Lisa, who approached with a curious smile that faded when she saw David in expensive clothes and accompanied by a child. "David?" Lisa said hesitantly, stopping a few steps away. "This is my son," David said, his voice coming out weaker than usual. "Ethan." Ethan extended his hand politely, as he had been taught, but David could feel the tension radiating from him. "Nice to meet you. Are you Lily?" "I am. Uncle David talks a lot about you. He said you are very smart." David looked at his dad with surprise. "Did you talk about me to them?" David was sweating profusely. How could he explain without revealing the whole lie? Yes, of course. I always talk about the kids from the families we help at the foundation," he said, trying to sound natural. Lisa frowned. "Families we help? Ethan, David is your son." "Yeah, I know. I misspoke." "Dad," Ethan interrupted, "why is she calling you David, and what foundation is that?" The silence that followed was deafening. David felt sweat trickling down his back, desperately trying to find an explanation that made sense. "Ethan, it's complicated," he finally said. "David," Lisa said, her voice becoming more serious, "what's going on here?" Lily, sensing the tension in the air but not fully understanding, held Ethan's hand. "Do you want to see my new drawing? I drew a family with 4 people this time." Ethan looked at her, then at his dad, then at Lisa. 4 people. "Yes, me, Mom, Uncle David, and now you, because we can be a big family." Lily's innocent statement made the situation even more painful. David saw Ethan stiffen, slowly processing what was happening. "Uncle David," Ethan repeated. "Dad, why does she call you uncle?" Lisa stepped closer, her gaze becoming more penetrating. "And Ethan, why do you call David Dad?" It was then that the realization hit everyone. Lisa stared intently at David, mentally comparing the well-dressed man in front of her to the humble David she knew. Ethan looked at Lily, then at Lisa, then at his dad, beginning to understand that something was very wrong with the situation. "My name is not David," David finally said, feeling that there was no way to sustain the lie any longer. "My name is David Johnson, and I have a lot to explain." Lisa took a step back as if she had been slapped. "David Johnson, the businessman, owner of the hotels." "Do you know him, Mum?" Lily asked, confused. "I know him by name. He is—" Lisa paused, processing the information. "You've been lying to me this whole time?" Ethan looked at his dad with a mix of anger and disappointment. "Dad, what is this? Who are these people?" "Ethan, I can explain." "Explain what? That you have a second family? That you lie to everyone?" "That's not it." "Then what is it?" Lisa practically shouted, drawing curious glances from other shoppers in the mall. "You pretended to be a non-profit coordinator, invented an entire foundation, deceived me for months. Why?" Lily started to cry, scared by the shouting. "Mum, why are you mad at Uncle David?" "Because he is not Uncle David," Lisa said, picking Lily up in her arms. "He is a completely different person." David tried to approach. "Lisa, let me explain. When I met Lily at the mall—" "At the mall? Which mall? You said you met me through the community health center." "It was at the Mall of America when I was dressed as Santa Claus. Lily told me about your illness and I—" "Santa Claus," Ethan interrupted. "Dad, were you dressed as Santa Claus?" Lily stopped crying for a moment. "Are you the Santa Claus I talked about at the mall? For real?" "I am," David said softly to her, then looked at Lisa. "When she told me it was your last Christmas, I couldn't forget. I wanted to help, but I knew you wouldn't accept charity from a rich stranger. So you invented an entire foundation. Lisa asked, incredulous. You made up a whole lie, Ethan added, furious. Just like you did with me when you said things would be different. Ethan, this has nothing to do with you. Doesn't it? You were playing dad with her while you barely had time for me. Ethan's accusation hit David like a dagger. It was true, and he knew it. That's not true, David said, but his voice didn't sound convincing even to himself. Lisa shook her head, with Lily still in her arms. David, or whatever your real name is, you lied about everything. Your name, your job, your life. How can I trust anything you say? Because everything I did was to help you. Everything you did was to satisfy your conscience, Lisa retorted. You wanted to feel better for being an absent dad, so you decided to play the substitute dad for my daughter. The truth in Lisa's words cut David deeply, because it was partially true. That's not how it was. Yes, it was, Ethan shouted. She's right. You care more about other people's kids than about me. Ethan, I hate you, Ethan shouted and ran towards the mall exit. Ethan, wait, David shouted, running after him. Lisa stood still, holding a confused, crying Lily, watching David chase after her son through the crowd of the mall. Mom, Lily sobbed, is Uncle David a bad person? Lisa looked at her daughter, her heart breaking. How could she explain to a 7-year-old that the man they considered a guardian angel had been lying all along? No, my love, she said softly. He's not bad, but he hasn't been honest with us. Is he not going to visit us anymore? Lisa felt her own tears begin to flow. I don't know, Lily. I really don't know. David managed to catch up to Ethan in the parking lot, grabbing the boy's arm before he could run into the street. Ethan, stop, let's talk. I don't want to talk to you, Ethan shouted, trying to break free. You're a liar. I know it seems that way, but... Seems? Yes, you lied to them, lied to me, probably lied to everyone. David knelt in front of his son. Ethan, look. At me. I never lied to you. You did. You said things would be different. You said you would have time for me, but you were busy playing happy family with other people. That's not what I was doing. Then what was it? Why do you care so much about them? David looked at his son, seeing in Ethan's eyes the same pain he had seen in Lily's eyes that day at the mall. The pain of a child who felt abandoned by his father. Because when I met Lily, David said slowly, I saw in her the child you were when I wasn't there, and I wanted to make up for everything I didn't do for you. Ethan was silent for a moment, processing his father's words. So you know you were a bad dad to me? I know, and I'm sorry. And you thought being a dad to her would fix that? David had no answer to that question because Ethan had hit the nail on the head with a truth he didn't want to admit even to himself. I just wanted to help. Ethan shook his head. You wanted to feel better, but you made me feel worse. As they drove home in silence, David knew he had lost much more than a peaceful afternoon with his son. He had lost Ethan's trust, Jessica's trust, and he had probably broken Lily's heart. His attempt to be a hero had turned into a tragedy for everyone involved. In the 3 days that followed the disastrous encounter at the mall, David barely managed to sleep. Ethan hardly spoke to him, limiting himself to monosyllabic answers when asked about school, homework, or any other topic. The apartment, once full of possibilities for reconciliation between father and son, now echoed with a cold silence that cut David like a blade. On Monday morning, David tried once again to talk to Ethan during breakfast. Son, can we talk about what happened at the mall? Ethan didn't even look up from his cereal. There's nothing to talk about. Of course there is. You have every right to be angry, but I need you to understand. Understand what? That my dad is a liar? Ethan finally looked at David, and the coldness in his child's eyes was devastating. or that you care more about strangers' kids than about me. Ethan, that's not true. Isn't it? Ethan got up from the table. You spent months helping that girl, buying things for her, going to her events. When was the last time you came to one of mine? David opened his mouth to respond, but couldn't. Ethan was right, and they both knew it. That's right, Ethan said, grabbing his backpack. I'm walking to school. Ethan, I'll drive you. No need. I know you must have important commitments for your fictional foundation. The door slammed, leaving David alone in the kitchen, feeling as if he had been hit by a train. At work, David couldn't concentrate. During the weekly meeting with the company directors, his mind constantly wandered. He thought of Lily, who probably didn't understand why her guardian angel had disappeared. He thought of Jessica, who must be feeling anger and betrayal. He thought of Ethan, whose distrust of his father had been confirmed in a devastating way. David, the voice of Marcus, his financial director, brought him back to reality. Are you okay? I asked about the first quarter numbers twice. Sorry, David said, trying to compose himself. It's personal issues. After the meeting, Jessica intercepted David before he reached his office. Mr. Johnson, that girl from the foundation called several times. Jessica, I think. She said it's urgent. David felt his stomach tighten. He had completely forgotten about Jessica and the fictional office he maintained in East Los Angeles. From his office, he called Jessica. Mark, finally! Where have you been? Carla called last night crying, saying strange things about you being someone else. David closed his eyes. Jessica, I need to tell you the truth. What truth? The International Christmas Hope Foundation doesn't exist. It never did. I made it all up. The silence on the other end of the line lasted almost a minute. What do you mean, made it up? David told Jessica the whole story, from the encounter with Lily at the mall to the disaster on Thursday. When he finished, he could hear Jessica quietly crying. Oh my God, David, why didn't you tell me the truth from the beginning? Because I thought you wouldn't want to be part of something like this. You're right, I wouldn't. Lying to a vulnerable family. Jessica took a deep breath. But now I understand why Carla was so devastated. What exactly did she say? That you had deceived her, and Lily for months, that she felt humiliated, that she didn't know what to believe anymore, and she said Lily was asking if she had done something wrong for you to disappear. David felt as if someone was squeezing his heart with their hands. Jessica, I need to fix this. How? They trust Mark Johnson, who doesn't exist. They don't trust David Johnson, who deceived them. That afternoon, David drove to East Los Angeles. He didn't have a specific plan, just the desperate need to try to explain to Jessica and Lily that, despite the lies about his identity, his affection for them was genuine. When he arrived at the building where they lived, he climbed the 5 flights of stairs with his heart racing. He knocked on the door of apartment 52, and it was Mrs. Smith, the neighbor who took care of Lily, who answered. You're Mark, she said, recognizing him immediately. Jessica told me what happened. How are they? Mrs. Smith shook her head sadly. Lily won't stop asking why you disappeared. Jessica is devastated, young man. She fell in love with you, you know? The words hit David like a punch. He had suspected, but hearing it confirmed made everything worse. Can I talk to them? Jessica doesn't want to see you. She left for work early to avoid running into you, and she took Lily with her. So how can I? Young man, Mrs. Smith interrupted him. You did something very wrong. That girl sees you as a father. Jessica saw you as, well, she was like the love of his life. And you lied about everything. I lied about my name and my profession. I never lied about my feelings. But how are they going to believe that now? David had no answer. That night, when he got home, he found Ethan doing homework at the dining table. The boy didn't even lift his eyes when his dad arrived. How was school today? Normal. Did you make new friends? Some. David sat down next to his son. Ethan, can we try to talk like two mature people? Ethan stopped writing and looked at his dad. Go ahead. You have every right to be mad at me. What I did was wrong, and I have no excuses. But I want you to know that I never, ever loved Lily more than I love you. Then why did you help her and not me? The question was simple, but the answer was complex, because when I saw Lily that day, she reminded me of you, of how small you were and how you needed me, and I wasn't there. And now you decided to be the dad you weren't for me, but for her. I guess so. Ethan nodded slowly. At least you admit it. Ethan, I want to be a better dad for you, really this time. How can I trust you? You lied to that woman and her daughter for months. How do I know you won't lie to me too? David looked at his 10-year-old son, impressed by the maturity of his questions. Because this time, I won't pretend to be someone else. I'll be myself, with all my flaws, trying to be a better dad. Ethan was silent for several minutes, processing. And them? Lisa and Lily? I don't know. I think I messed everything up. Did you really like them? David nodded. Very much. Lily is an amazing girl, and Lisa is an extraordinary woman. Then you have to fix it. David looked at Ethan in surprise. How? I don't know. But you can't just disappear from their lives. That's cowardly. Ethan's wisdom left David speechless. His 10-year-old son had just given him the lesson on responsibility he needed to hear. You're right, David said, but I don't know how to fix such a big lie. By telling the truth, Ethan said simply, the whole truth, even if it hurts. And what if they don't forgive me? Ethan shrugged. At least you'll have tried to do the right thing. That night, David stayed up very late thinking about Ethan's words. His son was right. He couldn't just disappear from Lisa and Lily's lives. He needed to find a way to explain his motivations, even knowing he might never be forgiven. But before that, he needed to be honest with himself about his own feelings. He had helped Lily out of paternal guilt, but he had fallen in love with Lisa for completely different reasons. And now he needed to figure out if there was any way to turn a foundation based on lies into a family based on truth. 2 weeks had passed since the devastating encounter at the mall, and Lisa felt like she was living in a nightmare from which she couldn't wake up. During the day, she tried to maintain normalcy for Lily, but at night, when the girl was asleep, she stayed awake replaying every conversation, every gesture, every moment she had shared with the man she believed to be David Johnson. "Mom, why doesn't Uncle David come to visit us anymore?" Lily asked every day, and with each question, Lisa felt her heart break a little more. "He's busy with other things, sweetheart," was all she could respond. But Lisa was not a woman who accepted vague answers, especially when it came to her daughter's happiness. On Friday night, after Lily fell asleep, she sat down at Mrs. Smith's borrowed computer and began researching David Johnson. What she found left her even more confused. David Johnson, 38 years old, CEO and founder of Johnson Hotels, one of the largest luxury hotel chains in the United States, estimated net worth of over $200 million, graduated in business administration from NYU, MBA from Harvard, divorced, one son. The photos showed an elegant man, always impeccably dressed, attending high society events in New York. He was clearly David Johnson, but at the same time, he was a complete stranger. How could someone with so much money care about a cleaner and her daughter? She murmured to herself, scrolling through the page. She found a recent interview where David spoke about corporate social responsibility and assistance programs. There was a photo of him handing a check to a real charity for underprivileged children. Between the lines, Lisa realized he was talking about second chances, and not repeating the mistakes of the past. On Monday, Lisa made a decision that would change everything. During her night cleaning shift at the Hudson River Business Complex, she discovered that one of the buildings she cleaned was the corporate headquarters of Johnson Hotels. It was around 10 p.m. when she arrived on the 42nd floor, where the company was located. The floor was empty, as it always was during her shift. Lisa began her routine cleaning, but when she reached the main office, a huge room with a panoramic view of New York, she stopped. David's desk was covered with papers, but what caught her attention was a framed photo in the right corner. It was David with a boy who was clearly Ethan, his son. They were both smiling, but there was something forced about David's smile, as if he were trying to compensate for something. Lisa approached the desk and saw other details that made her understand a little more about the man behind the lies. There were handwritten notes on post-its scattered around the computer. Call Ethan, school, parent meeting, don't forget, vacation plan with Ethan. In an ajar drawer, she saw the tip of a familiar paper. Her heart stopped when she recognized it. It was the letter that Lily had written. She was given to Santa Claus at the mall. The crumpled letter she had drawn with her family of 3 people, including the snowman, in place of her dad. My God, she sighed, picking up the letter with trembling hands. David had kept Lily's little letter. For almost 6 months, he had kept that simple drawing of a child on his desk, amidst million-dollar contracts and corporate reports. At that moment, he heard the elevator opening. Lisa quickly tucked the letter into the drawer and returned to cleaning, pretending to be focused on wiping the furniture. David appeared at the office door, stopped upon seeing her, and turned completely pale. "Lisa!" "David," she replied without looking at him, continuing to clean the desk. The silence stretched for several seconds before David entered the office and closed the door behind him. "Do you work here?" he asked, although the answer was obvious. "I do. For 3 years. Night cleaning." I didn't know." Lisa finally looked at him. David was dressed in an expensive dark suit, but his eyes were red, and there was visible exhaustion on his face. "Of course you didn't know. Ethan Johnson never bothered to find out where I really worked. Lisa, please. You lied about everything," she said, her voice trembling with contained anger. "Your name, your profession, your entire life. Lied about my identity, never lied about my feelings." Lisa let out a bitter laugh. "Feelings? What feelings? Pity, guilt, fun?" "Love," David said simply. The word hung in the air between them. Lisa stopped cleaning and looked directly at David. "Love?" she repeated. "Do you love Ethan Johnson or David Johnson? Because I don't know David Johnson." "You do know. Every time I was with you and Lily, I was myself. The only thing that changed was the name and the profession." "The name and the profession were lies. How can I believe that everything else was true?" David stepped closer to the desk, standing on the opposite side from her. "Because you saw who I really am. You saw how I look at Lily, how I feel when I'm with both of you. I saw how Ethan looked at Lily. I don't know how David looks at her. It's the same person, Lisa." "It's not," she exploded, finally releasing all the anger she had bottled up for weeks. "Ethan was a humble man who worked at a non-profit, who understood our reality, who was on our level. David is a millionaire who plays at charity to feel better about himself. That's not true, isn't it? Then why did you create this whole charade? Why didn't you come to me as David Johnson and offer help directly?" David fell silent because he knew she was right. "Because you knew I would never accept charity from a rich man," Lisa continued. "So you invented an entire foundation, hired an actress, rented an office, all to deceive me and make me accept your help. to help you, to feel better for being an absent dad. The accusation hit David like a slap. Ethan told you that? He didn't need to. I saw it in your eyes every time you looked at Lily. You weren't seeing her. You were seeing the son you abandoned. David sat in one of the chairs, suddenly exhausted. You're right. Partially. Partially. Yes, I saw Ethan in Lily at first. And yes, I wanted to make up for everything I didn't do for him. But... David raised his eyes to Lisa. At some point, I stopped seeing Ethan in Lily and started seeing Lily in Lily. I stopped trying to compensate for my mistakes as a dad and started to genuinely care about her. And me? Lisa asked softly. David looked her in the eyes. With you, it was never compensation. It was love at first sight, if that exists. Lisa felt tears beginning to form, but she fought to hold them back. How can I believe you? I don't know, David admitted. I destroyed your trust. I lied about who I was. But Lisa, what I feel for you and for Lily is the most real thing in my life. More real than your son, David sighed deeply. Ethan hates me, and he has every right to. I was a horrible, absent dad, focused only on work. When I met you both, I saw a chance to be the man I never managed to be. At the cost of lies. At the cost of lies, he agreed. And now I've lost both of you, and my son despises me even more. Lisa finished cleaning the desk in silence. When she was done, she grabbed her cleaning supplies and headed for the door. Lisa, David called, is Lily okay? Lisa stopped at the door without turning around. She asks about you every day. She wants to know if she did something wrong for you to disappear. She wants to know when Uncle Ethan will come back to visit them. And what do you tell her? That you're busy, because I don't have the courage to explain to a 7-year-old that the man she considers a dad lied about who he really is. Can I see her as David? Explain things. Lisa finally turned around. David, you're a stranger to her. Lily knows Ethan Johnson, who doesn't exist. How are you going to explain that to a child? David had no answer. When you invented this lie, Lisa said before leaving, you didn't think about the consequences. You didn't think about how it would be when the truth came to light. And now Lily is suffering because she lost the dad she never had. Ethan is suffering because the dad he has is a liar, and you. I fell in love with a ghost, she said, and left, leaving David alone in his luxurious office, surrounded by everything he had achieved, but having lost the only people who truly mattered to him. A week after the tense meeting in the office, David was at home trying to work when Ethan appeared in the living room with a determined expression he hadn't seen in months. Dad, we need to talk. David closed the laptop. Ethan was surprised. It was the first time in weeks that he called David Dad instead of just you. Of course, son, sit here. Ethan sat on the sofa but maintained a formal posture. I've been thinking about this whole situation, with Lily and her mom. Ethan, I know you're mad. Let me finish, Ethan interrupted with a maturity that impressed David. You did something very wrong by lying to them, but I understood one thing. What? You really like them, don't you? David nodded. Very much. And do they like you too? They did, before they found out the lies. Ethan was silent for a moment, as if organizing his thoughts. Dad, have you ever stopped to think that maybe the problem isn't that you like them, but how you dealt with it? David looked surprised at his 10-year-old son. What do you mean? You lied because you thought they wouldn't accept help from a rich person, right? But have you ever tried to find out if that's true? Ethan, of course it's true. People like your mom and Lily have pride. People like them. Dad, you're talking as if they were aliens. Ethan shook his head. They're just normal people going through tough times. That doesn't make them different from us. The simplicity of Ethan's observation hit David deeply. His son was right. He had created an artificial barrier between people like them and people like him. And there's another thing, Ethan continued. Lily likes you, the real you, not the invented Miguel. I saw how she looked at you at the mall. She wasn't looking at your money or your expensive clothes. She was looking at you. But Ethan, now she must be confused, not understanding. Then explain it to her. You're an adult, she's a child. Adults explain things to children when they mess up. David was impressed by Ethan's maturity, but also worried. Ethan, why are you helping me? You were so mad at me. Ethan sighed, looking much older than his 10 years. Because I realized something. When you were helping Lily, you were the dad I always wanted to have, caring, attentive, present. Ethan, let me finish. I was mad because I wanted you to be like that with me too. But now I understand that you can be like that. You just need to learn how. David felt his eyes welling up. How did you get so wise? I talked a lot with my therapist when I was in Los Angeles, Ethan said simply. She helped me understand that sometimes parents do wrong things because they're trying to do the right things, but they don't know how. And do you forgive me? Ethan hesitated. I'm trying. But there's one condition. What? You have to fix things with Lily and Lisa, not because you feel guilty, but because they deserve it. Ethan, I don't know how. I do, Ethan said, pulling a folded paper from his pocket. I have a plan. David took the paper and saw a drawing made by Ethan. 2 buildings connected by a bridge, with figures of people walking back and forth. What is this? It's how to solve the problem. Look, you have 2 worlds, right? The world of David, the rich businessman, and the world where you want to be with Lily and Lisa. But you thought those worlds couldn't meet. And they can't. Yes, they can. You just need to build a bridge between them. David looked confused at his son. What kind of bridge? Ethan smiled for the first time in weeks. The truth, Dad. The truth is the bridge. Ethan, I tried to tell the truth. They don't want to listen to me. No, you tried to explain yourself. It's different. Telling the truth is showing who you really are, not just explaining why you lied. David was still confused, but Ethan continued excitedly. Look, you helped them by pretending to be poor, right? Now you need to help them by being rich. How? Simple. You create a real foundation, not a fake foundation to trick them, but a real foundation to help families like theirs. David looked at Ethan, impressed. Did you think of this on your own? I did, and there's more. You make Lily and Lisa part of the foundation, not as people who receive help, but as people who help other families. Ethan, they will never accept. They will, if you explain it right. Lisa knows the reality of poor families because she lived it. Lily understands what it's like to be a child in difficulty. They can help other people much better than any rich social worker. David fell silent, processing the idea. It was brilliant in its simplicity. But they will still be mad that I lied. Of course they will, but they will also see that you're trying to fix things the right way this time. And what if they don't want to? Ethan shrugged. At least you tried to do the right thing, and I will be proud to have a dad who tries to fix his mistakes. David looked at his son, feeling a mix of love and pride he hadn't felt in years. Ethan, when did you grow up so much? When I realized I needed to be more mature than you to help our family resolve itself, Ethan said with a mischievous smile. David laughed for the first time in weeks. Our family. Yes, me, you, Lily, and Lisa. If you don't mess it up again. But Ethan, what if they don't want to be part of our family? Ethan became serious for a moment. Dad, have you ever asked what they want, or did you just decide what was best for them? Ethan's question hit David like a lightning bolt. He had unilaterally decided that Lisa and Lily wouldn't accept help from a rich person. He had decided that they needed to be protected from the truth. He had made all the decisions for them without ever asking what they really wanted. "You're right," David said. "I never asked." "Then it's time to ask," Ethan said, standing up. "But Dad—" "Yes? This time ask them."